Hi, this is Dan Korver, pastor here at Dalton Hill Baptist Church. We're a small Baptist church located in Owasso, Oklahoma. We're small enough to know you, but we're big enough to serve you and for you to serve as well. Our vision is to rescue, restore, and return to service. Rescue a non-believer or a believer who has been hurt or is lost, restoring them to Christ in fellowship with other believers with the desire that they in turn will help others along their way.
We've been going through the teachings of Jesus, and just when you look at different ones, I thought of another one today or this past week, been thinking about it, and it kind of reminded me. 25 years ago, I was approached by Dirk Morris. Don will know who that is. We went to church with him, and I was on a mission trip, and Dirk helped set it up. I was in Malaysia and took Will with me. And Dirk approached me. He was over the health, safety, environmental at the refinery. And he asked me to come work at the refinery as an environmental technician. I said, I've never been in a refinery. I've never seen what an environmental technician does. I've never seen what you're wanting. And he just said, well, would you come out and try it? And so he started thinking about it. I thought, well, I'd make a fair wage. I'd have insurance, which we didn't have at the time. And they would train me. But there's a catch. You had to give promise. Dirk said he would take you 2 years of our training, put training into you before you are really equipped to do the job. So we want you to commit to 5 years to be fair to the company. We can't put it in writing, but we want your word that that's what you would do. Also, I'd have to give up my full-time yard business. Well, it's kind of nice to be in a t-shirt and shorts in the summertime and not wearing Nomex and a hard hat and having everybody else tell you what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a cost. There's a benefit, but then there's also a cost. And so I want to look a little bit about this, the cost of the commitment of being a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so from the background, if you remember, you don't have to turn to this part because you'll be very well aware of it. John 1, you remember Jesus is in the baptism. He comes out of the baptism from John, and he turns and he says, behold, the Lamb of what? Who takes away the sins of the world. And Andrew immediately, who was a disciple of John, immediately left and did what? Went Jesus, and he then goes and finds Peter and says, we have found the Messiah. So obviously they were searching for it. A little later on, Jesus finds Philip, tells him to follow him. Philip goes and finds Nathanael. Okay, so here it's called, this is what Bud Peterson's doing with his ministry, called Come and See. And basically, their disciples were invited to come and see, so they get to see what Jesus is doing, they see how he's doing, they see the claims, and they come to see what they want to believe in him. Then you also had if you will, turn to John 6 for a moment. You also have what's called the curious, convinced, or committed disciple. Disciple Greek word simply means pupil. So just because they use the word disciple doesn't mean they are a believer. Later on, we'll use it that way, but in John chapter 6, if you remember, Jesus had just fed the 5,000, and in verse 48, he says, I am the bread of life. And then he gets to verse 54 and 55, and basically he says, where we get part of the Lord's Supper from, that I am basically my body and blood is what the sacrifice for you for salvation. So for many of them that are in the audience, they're thinking they're getting to heaven by doing what the law says, by doing good works, and so on. And that's why they notice in verse 60 then what happened when Jesus made this claims that I am the way. Notice in verse 60, many therefore disciples, when they heard this, said, this is a difficult statement. Who can listen to it? You're claiming to be the Messiah and my substitute for me. Notice then in verse 66, as a result of this, many of his disciples withdrew and were not walking with him anymore. They were curious. They were with him. He claims to be the Messiah. And what? No. Notice then going from curious to the convinced. 67. Jesus therefore said to the 12, you do not want to go away also, do you? Notice Simon Peter's answered, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. So you have the curious and you have those who are convinced. But notice then, what about the ones that are committed, a totally committed person? Take up your cross daily and follow me. There's a difference. You have the curious, you have the convinced, and you have the committed. It's also interesting when you look at thinking about the committed in Mark chapter 3 and verse 14. It says Jesus appointed the 12. Now if you look into the Gospel of Luke, you'll find Jesus prayed all night. He selects the 12. But in chapter 3 of Mark, in verse 14, he chooses them to be with him and to send them out. Why did he want them with him?
So he could teach.
He could teach not only words, but they could see how to do things. But he sends them out immediately. Most of us, how many of us want to be sent out? I learned a little bit, and now God wants me to go out and share it with other people. Most of us wait till when? When we think we're ready, and I think I know enough. He's sending them out right away to go teach, to cast out demons. How many of you are willing to go cast out a demon, and you're going to say what? I've been a Christian 40 years, and I'm not ready. So you think about it. They went out 2 by 2s. How many of them had an option? They could have left. So they're going from curious, convinced, and you think about the committed. So when you think about it, are you a committed disciple? And notice that's why Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 2 says in verse 2, teach these, what I've taught you, teach them to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. At the refinery, I have over 20 people have come through, and you teach them my job, but how many of them are still there? They see what they're doing is like, I don't want any part of it. No. So now they've listed my job. They've closed. 27 people applied for it, and they stopped it before they got more. And now they're going to interview. Well, there's one, and you'll see how this fits in. There's one who's been in the instrument shop for 19 years. Very capable, moved all the way up the channel, but he wants more freedom, so he thinks he wants my job. And I've talked to him at times. So what would be the best thing? I said, I stopped him. I said, I think the best thing for you to do is come and see. So he rode with me all day Friday, seeing the pros and cons. Well, this is a lot dirtier job than what I've got. I said, well, Monday we're going to look at what my really part of my dirty job is if you want to look at it. And so he's seeing, he's curious, and now he's trying to decide, am I convinced and become committed to switch? Because I have a lot of good things. I know my job. I can do it with the back of my hand. Do I really want to jump into this? Okay, so that's why I wanted him to do it or anybody else. There's a couple others. You need to see the job. You don't know what it. Same thing. There's so much more to this job. That's true in any job. You don't know what it is. But here you have it. Jesus is wanting to tell you, are you a curious disciple? I want a convinced and I want a committed disciple. And where are you at? Now we think about it, and how many of us are passing it on? Are we really passing it on? I think it's interesting when you look at it. So obviously, I guess he's going to be with me, and it's interesting. His brother, who works there, also applied for the job. So we'll find out how that might go out. But you stop and think about it. The main text I'd like for us to look at would be, look over with me if you would for Luke chapter 14. In Luke 14, Jesus is telling all the different ones who start coming up with a bunch of excuses why they don't want to follow. Well, I got to first go bury my dad, or I got animals or whatever it might be. And if you look at it in Luke chapter 14, let's look starting in verse 25. Luke 14:25. Now there's a great multitude were coming along with him, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, even his own life, he can't be my disciple. Well, doesn't that seem kind of harsh? Okay, it doesn't mean the word hate as what we would think of. It's kind of like Jacob has I loved and Esau have I what? Hated. Okay, did Jesus die for Esau? So in other words, it has to do with who's number one. Who do you choose? So when it comes here, isn't that what Jesus also said when his children, or his brothers and sisters came and went up against him, and he said, whoever does my will is my brothers? When it comes to who it is first and foremost in your life, that's the first part. The cost of discipleship, who is first and foremost? You're going to find it. I remember when I was in college with Bill, and he might even talk to him when he gets here. He was youth pastor, and he had a person in Decatur, Alabama that wanted to go into ministry. Parents said to him, Southeastern Bible College, where we went, and just said, you go to Bible college, I'm not paying for it. I want you to go to the university and make so you can make the money and do whatever. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? That's what Booker did. Remember, we saw that William Borden, gave up millions to become a missionary. Most of us will never have the option to give up millions, but we do have to give up something when we make a choice. So Jesus, the first thing going from a convinced to a committed is the very thing, number one in my life, is God number one. And I've used the statement many times, God is more interested in someone who says yes to Him than someone who says no. Is that true? You really need someone who cannot say no to Him. If I have the choice of saying yes, then who's in charge? If I cannot say no, who's in charge? He is. So what most of us do, I decide. I'm the captain. I decide what I say yes to and what I say no to. Notice the second one that he has. But you have, whoever does not carry his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. In fact, in Luke 9:23 probably gives it even better. It says, whoever wishes to be my disciple, let him deny himself, take up his what? And what's the next word? Missed a word. Daily. It is a daily choice. You may be following Him today, but that doesn't mean you're following Him tomorrow. You'll come up with different difficulties. One thing, I'll do that. Then all of a sudden God says, I want you. Oh, no, I'm not doing that. It's a faithful follower every single day. Young men, you guys are in the military. What kind of partner do you want? You want one that says, I like that order, I'm going to obey it? Or you want one that's, okay, that's my order and that's what I'm doing? Your whole team depends upon that, you being faithful to that order. So here you have it. First and foremost, the second one is a faithful follower. It's a daily decision. Notice the next one that you have in verse 28 down to 32. Which one of you, when he wants to build a tower, does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation, is not able to finish it, all who observe it will begin to ridicule him. Okay, let's just stop there for a minute. Many of you have been in Tulsa a long time. How many of you remember 21st and 129th, I believe it is? You remember the Eastland Mall? Okay, and you remember how they got started? And then what happened? They ran out of money, and you had big trees and everything was growing up in it, and everybody was laughing because they never completed. Then they come back and complete it, and obviously malls are not more of a thing of the past, and we have a lot of large companies in there now. But it was a laughing stock. They started to build it, and they didn't have the money, and they couldn't finish. And so what he's wanting us to do is he wants us to be far-sighted and focused. Really think ahead. Is this really what I want? Don't commit and then quit. He gives you another example. With 30, he would tell you, then this is the man who began to build and was not able to finish. But then notice he goes into a military term. Or what king, when he sets out to meet another king in battle, will first sit down and take counsel, whether he's strong enough with 10,000 men to encounter the one against him with 20,000. So you have how many men? Half the number of the other. So if I'm going to go battle him, what do I want to know before I ever go out there? Can half the number of men take them? Do I have an elevation advantage? Do I have a weapon advantage? If I don't, then I'm going to get defeated. Then let's don't even go. Because you're in the middle of the battle and he's winning. Now you want peace. What's going to happen? Is it going to cost you more than if you never gone out to battle with him to begin with? And that's what he goes on. Notice he says, or else, while the other's still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. Is that peace terms going to be a little greater than what it would have been beforehand? And so you stop and think about it. Is he really first and foremost in my life? Most of us have plans, and most of us will do what? We'll tell God our plans, and we want Him to do what? I want you to bless my plans, because they are really the very best that are possibly out there. Even when it says what? My ways are not your ways, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Wednesday night we started this one on David and so on. Humanly speaking, who would have been the better king? From purely looking at it, Saul or David? Who is called initially a man of valor? Saul. Who was the giant of Israel? Who was good looking and had an easy following? Who was old enough to be the leader? Here you have a 17-year-old who's taking care of sheep. Even Samuel was going to anoint David's brother, but God, because he also had outward traits. So you stop and think about it, we can so easily, that's why we're told in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with, and lean not unto your what? And then in part of your ways? Okay. And He'll direct you. And that's what's so hard. Because we want to do the other. We want to use our senses. And that's part of what happens. The older you get through experience, you try to tell the younger people what to do, but we're basing everything on what? Our own experiences, our own senses. And we have to stop and realize this is what my sensors are saying, but what is God saying? What's He saying? So you have the first and foremost, you have a faithful follower. And notice you have the far-sighted and focused. Look at the next one in verse 33. So therefore, no one who can be my disciple who does not give up all his possessions. Does that mean you can't own a house? No. Does that mean you can't own a car? So what does he mean? He means you need to be free to follow and serve. So if God says, I want you to give up the house and go on the mission field, you do what? You do. If He tells you, and it's easy for me to say this because it's not bragging, because give you the background. When Gene and I hadn't been married very long, and we were in Birmingham, we had 2 old cars. Clunkers. In fact, when we drove out here to visit my parents, it used 19 quarts going one way and 17 quarts going back. Okay, so this isn't a car that you really would want to, put a lot of money into. Okay. Because of the rear main seal there. You filled it up with oil and you checked the gas. Every 50 miles you just keep it running, pull over, pour a quart in, just keep on going. I was running 40 weight oil in it trying to keep it from going up. Okay, so we talked with the Lord, and the Lord, everything we have is yours. And we had another old clunker. She had one job going to school full time. I had another job, UPS, going full time. Toccoa Falls Bible College, which was Toccoa Falls, Georgia. We played them in basketball. Been up there. They also have a Toccoa Falls Dam. Because of all the rain in the late 70s, it ruptured, flooded the campus. There's a young couple with a little one. They lost everything except for their little one. Had nothing. Not one thing left. The Lord's saying, well, you need to give them your car. Well, Lord, how do I get to work? Gene needs to get to work. Yeah, can we? Yes, we can work it out. But you can think in your own head. Well, who in the world would want this old clunker? So you call him up on the phone, and I told him he uses the court, whatever. He goes, I don't have anything. I need to get to work. I'll take it. Okay, Lord, am I really free? Can I get another clunker? Yes, but I'm in a position to get another clunker. They're not. And the next clunker we got was for $550, and I drove it 100,000 miles, and I sold it for what I paid for it. But again, so it's easy to give away something like that. But when it's something else, but if it's all you have, but it's important for all of it. Is He really first and foremost in your life? Now, He normally isn't going to ask, but He will ask or test you. Did he test Abraham? Did He test? What about if you think about with Jericho? How many of you want to go the very first battle with people who have never really fought? Take on one of the strongest cities. Why not go to Ai first? A small one. You don't go to the big one first. And you don't walk around the city and go home 6 straight days. But if He's first and foremost, then that's what you do, even when it doesn't make sense. Notice the last one. I think it's interesting in verse 34 and 35. Therefore salt is good, but even salt has become tasteless with what it's seasoned. If you remember, salt in that day was just big piles. They didn't refine it all. And so when it was set out in the piles, if you had rain or whatever, what might happen? Then all of a sudden you're going to have minerals or other things that are in it that is no longer of any use. Well, if we're supposed to be salt, notice in 35, it's useless either for soil or for manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears, let him hear. When you go on down to later, Christ will talk about it's thrown on the roads. They would take this. We no longer get salt. Remember, how did they preserve food? Okay, how did you flavor food? How do you cause horses to want to go drink? You put salt on their food. Jeannie has the stuff she puts on them. She wants to make sure they drink and keep their gut moving and all the other stuff that they need to know so they don't get compacted. How many of us are that way? Is our speech seasoned? You go to Colossians and it tells us that it's supposed to be seasoned for each person. We don't have pat answers. What's the right answer to help that person, encourage them, to challenge them? It's not, yes, Christ is the answer and all that, but how do I present it to this one? I might present it different than to this one. So if I'm really committed, is He first and foremost? Am I a faithful follower? Whatever He tells me to do, I'm going to go do it. Am I farsighted? I really want to count the cost so as not to quit. Do I really want to be free to follow? What's keeping me back? And by the way, that's what the American deal is, to get everybody in debt. And then how free are you to leave? Be real careful, because debt will own you. You won't own the debt. And I think it's one thing about with the church. We've been looking for a building, but we've been able to use the money to do so many things that if we had, we'd be much more limited. We couldn't do it. And then also being flavored forever. Am I totally committed? So let's just think about it. Who or what is first in your life? How would you say, am I a curious disciple? Am I a convinced disciple? Or am I a committed disciple? I don't know what Jared's going to do. He was curious. But is he going to become a convinced and committed to switch departments? Or is he going to stay where he's at and continue doing the job that he does? So stop and you think about it. How many of us are willing to go anywhere God tells us to go? Or how many of us have parameters? I will do this, but I won't do that. So we want committed disciples. And we also, how many of us are taking what you're learning and teaching other people? Isn't that the goal? That's the whole goal. You're teaching them how to do things. And they will make mistakes. They will make mistakes. Just like we saw last week, George Beverly Shea, the first time he sang, how well did it go? And he said he'd never do it again because he chose a song too high. My uncle who came and spoke before he passed away here, he spoke, written many, many books. Had 2 doctorates and everything else, just phenomenal. A brilliant mind, it really was. He was in Texas, going to his seminary, and he drove a bus around picking up kids to bring them to church. He then was told he was to teach. Remember, when you're in Bible college seminary, you'll have to have a service, so you need to be doing something. So they go up to him, and he was told that he was going to teach a high school class. He's single, you're in seminary, but it wasn't just any high school deal. It's high school girls. Okay? You've never taught before. You work all week on it, and the same thing happened to me, I'll never forget. And you get up there, and your 30-minute lesson takes you how long? And then what do you do with these ladies? The next week, he got in the bus, and he went around, and he went and drove the bus the entire hour and never came to teach him. And said, I will never do it again. He ended up being one of the most respected teachers up in Faith Bible College and wrote many books. Don't judge it on the first thing. The first time you sing, the first time you do anything, may not go as well as you'd like. Seldom does. How many great quarterbacks had a great game their first game? Or very many. But let's just be committed. We leave the results to the Lord and not ourselves.
We'd love for you to come and visit with us and fellowship with us. We're located at 8263 North Owasso Expressway, which is on the east side of Highway 169 North, between 76th and 86th Street North. We have coffee and fellowship from 8:30 to 9 Sundays, followed by Sunday school for all ages from 9 to 9:45, and our Sunday morning worship service is from 10 to 11. We likewise have a Wednesday night service for all ages from 7 to 8. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times, and in every way the Lord be with you all the time.